Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. That was cool. I'm going to do... Maybe I should do the next Ukraine episode. That could be cool. All right, let's do it. I am on episode... Right, Ukraine continues attacking. That's the one I did. I'm on this one. Guys, original link to the video, top of the description. I will continue link below that, link to the Discord if that interests you. Would love to have you. You're welcome over there. Obviously they will continue making videos as the war goes on, and I will continue reacting to them because they're very interesting. And I really don't pay enough attention to the news as I should. And so this is even better than the news. All right, let's go. Original link to the video, top of the description. Kings and Generals, preemptive like attack on the Crimean Bridge. Let's do it. Okay.
It is the 8th month of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Much has happened on the battlefield and the diplomatic front in the first half of October, but unfortunately we're no closer to the end of this war. Ukraine continues its liberation efforts, while Russia has started sending its first mobilized troops into the battlefield. Stakes are getting higher, and the situation is escalating with the nuclear threat looming in the background. Welcome to our video on the events of the Russo-Ukrainian war that took place in the first half of October. Any soldier will tell you it's not always
ad time, guys. Please make sure any video I watch that you watch my reaction to, first of all, go check out their video first, and then come and watch with me, all right, guys? But Ridge wallet right here, please, original link to the video, top of the description of this video, and use their link for the wallet if it interests you, please.
You have to carry, but how you carry it that matters. And it's not like the average person's loadout can't benefit from such consideration too. Case in point, it's time to change out your big old wallet for a modern design from our sponsor, Ridge. Their designs hugely reduce the size of what you need to carry day to day, giving you a sleek and stylish wallet that's not only smaller than even the smallest wallet we had, but it comes with a lifetime guarantee. It's made from military-grade materials and built to last, so you'll never need to buy another wallet again. There's space for 12 cards, and there's a band and clip system to attach cash to the side as well. It all comes in over 30 colors, it's got over 50,000 5-star reviews, offers a 45-day money-back guarantee if you change your mind, comes packed with replacement components, and has RFID blockers to fight digital thieves. Upgrade today and never look back.
I got a new
or
credit
help someone
card
else
and then
out by gifting it, especially with the holidays coming
was
along.
found again.
Get a Ridge wallet with a discount by using our link in the description and coupon code Kings and Generals for 10% off. In our previous video, we described the Ukrainian advance east of the river Oskil. On October 1st, the Ukrainian army reached one of the main targets.
Hold on, let me get ready. Okay.
In our previous video, we described the Ukrainian advance east of the river Oskil. On October 1st, the Ukrainian army reached one of the main targets of its operations in northern Donbas by liberating Liman, as the 81st Air Mobile Brigade, elements of the National Guard, and the Klyuchevsky Battalion entered the city.
Guys, I mention this at the start of every video because it helps me so much. I'm not knowledgeable enough in Ukrainian cities and where they are, so the mini-map with the little upside-down green trapezoid really helps.
Russia also lost Yampil, Stavki, Zarichna, Torska, and several other settlements in this direction. At this point, the objective of the Russian command was to establish a relatively stable defensive line from Svatova to Crimea. The loss of Svatova would mean the loss of a critical logistical line in North Donbas, and the liberation of Crimea would increase the threat on the Severodonetsk-Lysychansk agglomeration, which Russia lost many men and equipment capturing. Russia retaliated for its losses with a missile strike on Kharkiv, which took the lives of 24 people. Russian setback attacks since September have caused significant discontent in the elite as well. The Chechen leader, Ramzan Kadyrov, heavily criticized the commander of the Central Military District, General Lapin, for the Russian losses on this front, and accused the chief of staff.
He was also the guy like telling the Russian government itself that like they wouldn't increase troops from Chechnya, right? And that they'd already met their quota for troops. So, okay.
District, General Lapin, for the Russian losses on this front, and accused the chief of staff, General Valery Gerasimov, of protecting Lapin. The oligarch and owner of the Wagner Group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, supported Kadyrov. Both Prigozhin and Kadyrov have armed groups, and they have been among the most vocal supporters of the invasion, and consistently urged Putin to escalate in Ukraine. It seems like there is some fight for power and status between the Ministry of Defense on one side and Kadyrov and Prigozhin on the other. On October 7th, the Washington Post published a story claiming that a member of Putin's inner circle criticized him personally for military setbacks in Ukraine. Around the same time, several Russian military bloggers theorized that cracks were forming in the Russian elite as pro-war and pro-peace groups developed in the Kremlin. Prigozhin and Kadyrov are prominent members of the pro-war faction who intend to discredit the Russian military command and strengthen their political positions through their actions in Ukraine. The pro-peace group consists of Russian officials who want a negotiated settlement with the West to avoid losing their assets and links with the West. We don't have sufficient information about internal processes in the Russian elite. Still, it is noteworthy that following Kadyrov's and Prigozhin's criticism, drastic changes were made in command of the Russian occupation force in Ukraine. In early October, it was reported that Lieutenant General Roman Berezhnikov replaced Colonel General Alexander Zhuravlev as the commander of the Western Military District, while Lieutenant General Rustam Muradov became the commander of the Eastern Military District instead of Colonel General Alexander Chaiko. Interestingly, Lapin has not been replaced, despite heavy criticism, as it seems like Putin does not want to acquiesce to the public demands of one of the factions, as balancing these factions has been one of the key factors behind his long reign. Putin cannot afford to look weak at this.
Interesting. I never really knew about that dynamic within Russia of, different groups that Putin has to keep, satisfied.
One of the,
if not satisfied, then equally promoted. Interesting.
The public demands of one of the factions, as balancing these factions has been one of the key factors behind his long reign. Putin cannot afford to look weak at this point. Still, Putin's promotion of Kadyrov to General Colonel, the second such promotion since the beginning of the war, created some discomfort among the nationalist groups, worried that the Chechen leader was gaining even more prominence. At the same time, Putin also understood the gravity of his military situation in Ukraine and changed the overall commander of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. General Sergei Surovikin, known for his brutal targeting of civilians in Syria, was appointed to this position on October 8th. Very soon, he started implementing his usual tactics in Ukraine, and we'll talk about it in a bit. But for now, let's go back to describing the developments on the North Donbas front. Following the liberation of Liman, the Russian withdrawal along the front continued. In the south of the front, the 81st Air Mobile Brigade and the 95th Air...
This area was really confusing. It seems like over the past, 4 videos, this area has been, just kind of confusing to me. It seems like they could have been... I don't know enough to really...
Following the liberation of Liman, the Russian withdrawal along the front continued. In the south of the front, the 81st Air Mobile Brigade and the 95th Air Assault Brigade pressed the Russian army units, which had earlier retreated from Liman, namely elements of the 144th Guards Motor Rifle Division, the remnants of the battered 201st Military Base, and the Bars 13 and 16 volunteer units, further towards the outskirts of Crimea. Also on October 2nd, the 71st Separate Jaeger Brigade pushed back the 61st Naval Infantry Brigade of the Russian Army from Nevsky, while the 66th Separate Mechanized Brigade liberated Terny. By October 3rd, Russian telegram channels claimed the Ukrainian forward units had been able to reach the P-66 highway.
I was about to say, if you can capture that.
Crimea, which threatened the Russian units in Svatovo, Rubizhne, and consequently in the Severodonetsk-Lysychansk agglomeration. Along with that, Nizhya Solona, Pytliman, Nizhnya Zherevka, Borova, Shikivka, Bohislavka, and Borivska Andrivka on the eastern bank of the Oskil were liberated by the 80th Air Assault Brigade and the 92nd Mechanized Brigade, as the Russian army in this area retreated to the east bank of the river Zherebets to create a new defensive line between Svatova and Crimea. On October 5th, the 71st Brigade continued its advance with the liberation of Rakivka and Makivka villages of the Luhansk Oblast, as the 61st Naval Infantry Brigade retreated towards the Russian defensive line around the P-66 highway. In the next few days, Ukrainian forces liberated Shlushkivka, Stelnikivka, Novolubivka, Novoyahorivka, Berestova, Pishchena, Krokhomelna, Kislivka, and Kotolyarivka, as the Russian army continued retreating to their defensive line to presumably make a stand there. Reports of the newly mobilized Russian troops arriving at the new Russian defensive line between Svatova and Crimea emerged on October 11th. Mixed information about Russian attempts to push back the 81st Air Mobile Brigade and the 95th Air Assault Brigade from the outskirts of Crimea towards Zarishna and Toska have been refuted by Ukrainian military bloggers, as the Russian counteroffensive launched on October 11th failed.
Guys, I've understood the blogger issue of the term. I understand. Thank you, guys.
Ukrainian military bloggers, as the Russian counteroffensive launched on October 11th failed.
To be real, you guys have been really good in the comments of all the reactions I've done, and I want to give a thank you, guys.
As the Russian counteroffensive launched on October 11th failed. Nevertheless, the arrival of Mobiks, as Russians call mobilized soldiers, may have pushed the Russian command to attempt to reverse the momentum on this front. Surely, mobilized Russian soldiers are untrained, or extremely poorly trained, but the early indications demonstrate that Russia intends to send the bulk of its new conscripts to the North Luhansk front line to stabilize it, and the sheer quantity of Russian troops in this area can potentially slow down the Ukrainian advance. As of October 16th, Ukraine has been advancing towards Svatova from 3 directions. The Ukrainian command intends to capture this town before the number of mobilized troops becomes a
question, guys. Do you guys think that Russia can use to its advantage the fact that it doesn't really have to worry about, this is not a war where Russia has to worry about a disaster so serious, doesn't have to worry about Ukrainians pushing into Russian territory, right? So really holding any defenses along the previous internationally agreed Ukrainian-Russian border would be kind of ridiculous, because if any Ukrainian soldiers started to move into Russia, which I think is completely fair for Ukrainians to do, I mean, Russia just invaded them, but that will, I'm assuming, cut off any help from the U.S. at all, because we would not want to be involved of any inner territorial, you know what I mean, right? Involved in supplying anything to people that are in Russia to avoid the MAD doctrine, right? The mutually assured destruction sort of thing.
Ukraine has been advancing.
So can't they use that fact, like the mutually assured destruction, that they know America or NATO won't support Ukrainian soldiers going past the line? They can use that into, right?
Ukrainian advance. As of October 16th, Ukraine has been advancing towards Svatova from 3 directions. The Ukrainian command intends to capture this town before the number of mobilized troops becomes a problem. For now, Mobiks and the remnants of the Russian army routed in the Kharkiv Oblast are the best hope for Russia to prevent the Ukrainian advance on Svatova and eventually Starobilsk, which, as we noted before, are critical logistical hubs for the Russian military presence in North Donbas. Losing them would mean that Russia would have to supply its troops in Donbas via a much longer route, from the MO4 and E40 highways and railroads along them, which would only exacerbate the Russian supply problem, which could potentially become a heavy blow for the whole Russian occupation campaign in Ukraine by becoming a massive problem for the Russian group in the Severodonetsk-Lysychansk agglomeration, putting Russian control over vast lands north of the city of Luhansk under serious threat. We must mention that both the Wagner mercenaries and LDNR separatists started constructing a line of World War-style trenches in the Hirska-Zolota area, which is currently 20 kilometers from the front. This raised some eyebrows, as this is the only general area where Russian forces have any momentum, and the Ukrainian advance is happening elsewhere. The Russians also experienced severe problems on the Hirska.
Well, maybe that's why they're doing it, in preparation. Because it might be futile.
Is happening elsewhere. The Russians also experienced severe problems on the Kherson front, where the battles intensified. On October 2nd, Ukraine breached Russian lines along the right bank of the river Dnipro and forced them to retreat up to 30 kilometers south. The Ukrainian 60th Brigade capitalized on the fact that the Russian 98th Guards Airborne Division was pulled out for rotation and cut through the understaffed 80th Motor Rifle Brigade. As a result, within a day, Ukrainian forces, reportedly spearheaded by 17 tanks and 11 infantry fighting vehicles, managed to advance for almost 30 kilometers from Zolotobalka to Datcheny, as the Russians hastily retreated. To the west of Datcheny, Kreshchenivka, Shevchenivka, and Lyubimivka were also liberated. This attack aimed to reach Novokhokovka.
I'm sorry because I probably asked this in a previous one and you guys might have answered it, but what does Kansk mean, or Insk, or like Borozensk, or Ivka, or you know what I mean? Like there are so many. Like, is that something like Harrisburg, or like is that a similar thing to like Berg is in the U.S. or Ville, right? Like Louisville. Somethingville, Harrisburg, something. I'm assuming.
Ivka and Lyubimivka were also liberated. This attack aimed to reach Novokhokovka and the P-47 highway to divide the remaining Russian forces on the right bank of the Dnipro. The 30th.
God, I had to shut up.
This attack aimed to reach Novokhokovka and the P-47 highway to divide the remaining Russian forces on the right bank of the Dnipro. The 35th and the 36th Naval Infantry Brigades of Ukraine were not able to achieve similar success around Davydiv Brid initially, but they finally managed to defeat the Russian units in the area, as on October 4th, Ukraine broke through the Russian defenses in Davydiv Brid, liberating this long-contested Russian stronghold in the area, along with Velika Oleksandrivka and Mala Oleksandrivka. The Russian retreat along the Dnipro continued as they blew a road bridge in the area to delay the Ukrainian advance. The long front line in the Kherson Oblast, sparsely manned by the Russian units, was tough to defend for the Russian army, suffering from diminishing manpower, and as their defenses had been breached, they decided to drop back and establish a narrower front line.
Why am I getting nervous right now? I don't know why. I'm just getting kind of like anxious.
And as their defenses had been breached, they decided to drop back and establish a narrower front line, roughly going along Brskniska, Borozenska, Milovo. The liberation of Datcheny means that Chaplinka, which Russia used extensively as an airbase and logistical hub, is now in range of the HIMARS missiles. Russian defenses in North Luhansk and Kherson Oblast had to rely on establishing strongholds in towns and villages, since Russia simply did not have enough men to defend the whole front line properly. Such strongholds are vulnerable to flanking and attacks from the rear, which the Ukrainian army took advantage of. Some Ukrainian commentators have criticized the Ukrainian command for not pursuing the routed Russian units, and hence deepening their advance, as instead they preferred to mop up villages and settlements on the way to prevent any surprises. The Ukrainian leadership probably chose this tactic not to overextend its supply lines, but this has allowed the Russian army to build some defensive fortifications on their next line of defense. There are reports of the construction of fortifications.
What is it with the freaking rivers in Ukraine? Why are they all like so wide and such like a big barrier?
In the city of Kherson and Vysela. There are reports of the construction of fortifications in the city of Kherson and Vysela. These fortifications cover a small area, and it looks like their purpose is to buy just enough time for the orderly retreat of the Russian units from the western bank of the Dnipro, if holding it becomes too costly. On October 9th and 14th, Russia attempted to counterattack Ternovy Novokamyanka, and Sukhi-Stevok, but this attempt was repulsed. It is reported that another common destination of mobilized Russian soldiers is the Kherson front. Putin wants to hold the right bank of the Dnipro, particularly after annexing Kherson Oblast, even though he's not sure where the borders of his annexed territories are, according to his spokesman Dmitry Peskov. Military commentators predict that Russia will have to withdraw to the eastern bank of the Dnipro in the foreseeable future. At some point,
that's the thing with the freaking that makes me so nervous is like Putin declaring like, okay, this is ours now. Well, does that? Well, we think no, it's not. Ukraine thinks no, it's not, or knows. So, like, are we in danger of? This is like the thing with the people wanting like, why isn't the U.S. sending planes to or like, I understand. I'm just getting anxious. I don't know. Look, I've never been in the army. Good thing, too, because I'm a freaking wimp.
Pressure, accompanied by the Russian inability to adequately supply its troops against the background of ever-present HIMARS strikes on pontoon bridges and crossings on the river Dnipro, will force them to make this tough and unpopular decision. It is claimed that Putin ordered his commanders not to retreat on the Kherson front. On October 8th, a huge symbolic, strategic and operational event occurred. A major explosion significantly damaged the Kerch Strait Bridge.
I saw this on the news. Didn't they like fix it? Didn't like Putin drive over it or something like that? It's like a PR.
Major explosion significantly damaged the
Look, how can we be losing? Look, I'm crossing a bridge.
Kerch Strait Bridge, linking Russia with occupied Crimea. This bridge, consisting of a highway and a railroad, completed in 2019, is a project considered very personal for Putin and has a symbolic meaning in terms of his perception of himself as a unifier of the Russian lands. The bridge was a statement project, conveying the message that Russia is now forever linked with Crimea. The Kerch Bridge allowed Russia to establish.
Why not? I'm no civil engineer, all right? I'm sure the Russian bridge engineers know more than I do, okay? But why go over so much open water? Why not, like, utilize this piece and, like, just go sloop, sloop, da-da-da-da-da, boom.
Establish a land link with the illegally occupied peninsula, enabling the Russian army to supply its units on the southern front. This explosion destroyed one lane of the road bridge and damaged the railroad track. Russia immediately started.
Guys, I don't know what it is. I'm sorry. I'm just like something about. Chill. Why is this making me antsy?
Repairing the bridge, which is already open for passenger rail and light road traffic. However, it looks like the bridge is still too damaged for the movement of heavily armored vehicles and rail freight transport, which exacerbates the supply issues of the southern front. There is another railway and highway connecting Russia to the occupied Kherson Oblast, but the Melitopol-Tokmak railway is too close to the Zaporizhian front, and the road connecting Mariupol to Kherson is of lower quality. The damage to the Kerch Bridge will likely cause delays in Russian logistics, as the government intends to complete the repairs by July 2023. There have been different explanations for this explosion. The most common version, corroborated by footage of the incident, is that a truck carrying explosives exploded on the bridge and caused the explosion of...
Wait, like a suicide bomber, or like are Ukrainian like parked the car and got away, hopefully.
7 fuel tanks moving on the railroad at this point. Unmanned kamikaze explosion of 7 fuel tanks moving on the railroad at this point.
You guys remember that Beirut explosion? That blew my freaking mind. Like, like that had to have been bigger than any explosion the military can create outside of a nuclear bomb. But like that Beirut explosion was bonkers.
Unmanned kamikaze boats and missile strikes are among other versions. Whatever the cause, the blast was received very differently by either side. Ukraine did not officially claim responsibility, but some officials openly celebrated the damage to the Kerch Bridge. Some have speculated that the explosion was caused by internal fighting in the Kremlin, possibly to sow more seeds of suspicion within Russian ranks. The Russian reaction was disbelief and anger. After all, the Kremlin guaranteed the security of the bridge on numerous occasions, but failed to protect it from what looks like an ingenious operation of Ukrainian intelligence. At first, Russia did not...
How is it that during wartime, in an area that the people you're warring on, what is the freaking word? You know what I mean? Is nearby, how do you not have the most insanely strict checkpoints before and after the bridge? Or like on either side, especially for any sort of like lorry truck or any sort of like moving van, anything other than like a regular car or pickup truck isn't stopped immediately. How isn't that a thing?
Officially blame Ukraine
Either
and opened an investigation, which predictably concluded that Ukraine was behind this attack.
You don't say.
It is essential to mention that the commentators claiming that Ukraine committed a terror attack are wrong. The bridge was used for military logistics, and as such was a valid military target.
I hate the word terror attack or terrorist now. Like, I don't know why. It's like just like with the word propaganda. Like, those are my two least favorite words. Terrorist and propaganda. Because they become my least favorite words because I've realized they're very harsh words that can be used by anyone for anything. And it's just like, okay, how do you know you're not propaganda? Or how do you know this person is a terrorist? But this has nothing to do with this video, by the way. This is just my general feeling about the words.
Target, even though civilian casualties occurred.
I'm freaking antsy.
Russia retaliated with a series of strikes on Ukrainian civilian infrastructure, lasting several days. It was arguably the biggest such attack since the early days of the war. On October 9th to 11th, 6 missiles hit several apartment blocks in Zaporizhia, killing dozens. This was followed by an airstrike on targets in 16 different cities in Ukraine. Russia launched 83 missiles and 24 drones, according to Ukrainian command. Ukraine managed to shoot down 43 missiles and 13 drones. But Russia still inflicted significant damage on Ukrainian infrastructure in Kyiv, Kharkiv, Dnipro, Lviv, Ternopil, Zhytomyr, Kremenchuk, and other cities. At least
who did we find out who fired the missile in Poland?
11 civilians were killed in this attack, which seemingly had little to no military significance, as Russia wasted its limited precision missile and drone stockpiles to damage Ukrainian energy and heating infrastructure, parks, playgrounds, residential buildings, a German consulate, and the pedestrian Klitschko Bridge in Kyiv. For several days, Russia continued its airstrikes, using Kh-101 and Kh-55 Iskander missiles and Shahed-136 drones supplied by Iran. These retaliatory airstrikes aimed to break the resolve of the Ukrainian people to fight, damage their morale, and cause problems with power and heating for ordinary Ukrainians. Surovikin, notorious for destroying Aleppo...
Guys, I think China is being smart, unless they do something stupid. Like, people usually, like, clump together. Again, I don't like clumping together countries. I'm not saying America is this bastion of virtue, all right? Or good heart. Like, look at Afghanistan or Iraq or Vietnam. I'm not... I will be the last to defend us as some moral arbiter. But in that, like, Iran is sending them stuff. Iran also, regardless of what it's doing to help Russia and Ukraine, is going through some bad stuff right now, their government. But people usually come together like Iran, North Korea, China, people in the West at least. Maybe just America. Iran, North Korea, China, Russia. And I feel like China is looking around and like, Yeah, it'd be nice to have Taiwan, but doesn't look like it's working out so great for Russia. And then Iran's not having a great time. And if China was smart, what am I talking about? I don't know what I'm saying.
For ordinary Ukrainians. Surovikin, notorious for destroying Aleppo.
Yeah, I do. Just like maybe lay low a bit if you want to like fulfill your
in the Syrian war.
Jesus, that was fail.
Damage their morale and cause problems with power and heating for ordinary Ukrainians. Surovikin, notorious for destroying Aleppo in the Syrian war, was putting his stamp on the Russian invasion using similar tactics. But this was an ineffective use of precision missiles. There is no indication that these airstrikes have broken the Ukrainian will to fight. On the contrary, it has made them angrier. Ukraine has responded by striking the energy infrastructure of Belgorod, along with targeting Russian ammunition depots stationed in the region. The Russian reserves of precious precision missiles have further decreased. According to the Ukrainian Defense Minister, Alexei Reznikov, Russia has used 1,235 out of 1,844 Iskander, Kalibr, and air-launched cruise missiles since the start of the war.
How often, Russia has a load of natural resources, I know that, and no shortage of people either. You know, they have over 100 million people, right? And so you have the manpower, you have the resources. I mean, Russia is no dummy when it comes to ballistic, or maybe USSR. My question is, like, do they replenish? Like, how do we know that it's 67% of their total?
Production of such missiles takes time, and sanctions imposed on Russia.
I'm such a goddamn idiot. If I would just wait, I would answer my own.
Production of such missiles takes time, and sanctions imposed on Russia may impact further production. Moreover, this attack has prompted the Western coalition to provide more air defense systems to Ukraine. Germany delivered Iris-T air defense systems, Spain pledged 4 Hawk air defense systems, the United States decided to expedite the delivery of the NASAMS air defense systems, France promised to provide Krotal short-range anti-air missiles, while the United Kingdom agreed to donate AMRAAMS missiles compatible with NASAMS, while NATO is going to provide 100 drone jamming stations to counter the Iranian drones.
But all of these nations are in NATO. Spain is in NATO, right? So, like, this is out of these nations' own budget, unrelated to NATO. And then this is what NATO as a together is also
the Russian mobilization, the declared annexation of the occupied Ukrainian lands, and the brutal attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure have pushed the West to provide more military support throughout the first half of October.
I feel like the Swedes would love to see the Russians crushed in a Poltava battle.
The United States pledged 155mm and 105mm howitzers, Excalibur precision-guided artillery shells and other artillery shells, HIMARS and HARM missiles, more armored vehicles, Claymore mines, anti-tank weapons, and so on. Canada promised to deliver winter uniforms, drones, and satellite services. The United Kingdom will provide 18 more howitzers and aerial drones. Germany agreed to send more Panzerhaubitze 2000 howitzers and Mars 2 MLRS. The West managed to maintain a steady supply of weapons to Ukraine.
I'm going to sound so stupid. I don't care. It's a question. What is the difference between a howitzer and a tank? I mean, if you just lower, it's for longer range. Never mind.
In October, too. There are fears that this arms support will diminish the Western weapon reserves, but for now the support is strong, and there's no indication that it will decrease. Russia also made moves to replenish its weapon stocks. They have regularly used Shahed 136 loitering munitions on Ukrainian military and civilian targets in its mass air attacks following the explosion on the Crimean Bridge and earlier on Bielosevka near Kyiv. According to the Ukrainian Southern Operation Command spokesperson Natalia Hymenyuk, Russia possesses between 300 to several thousand Shahed 136 drones. Later, reports from Ukraine claimed that Russia had asked Iran for 2,400 more drones. Iranian telegram channels also reported that Russia had ordered Arash-2 drones and Fateh 110 and Zulfikar missiles from Iran. The efficacy of these missiles is debated, but we know that they can respectively hit targets 300 and 700 kilometers away. On a separate note, Russia also decided to take 800 T-62 tanks and some World War II-era D-1 howitzers out of storage to use in Ukraine.
Okay, so they're just mobile howitzers.
There are reports that the main Russian tank factory, Orel-Vagonzavod, could only produce 24 tanks in September, primarily by cannibalizing old tanks, which is not nearly enough to replace their losses in armor. Simultaneously, it became known that Russia failed to deliver the T-90C tanks ordered by India and is using them in Ukraine. These tidbits show that Russia has problems in terms of hardware production. Interesting developments occurred in Belarus.
For sure. Showing you that they need the ready-to-go weapons or tanks, T-90C, more than they need the money. Shows you just how desperate they are for tanks and whatnot.
Problems in terms of hardware production. Interesting developments occurred in Belarus, a staging point for the initial Russian attack on Kyiv in February, also used for the missile strikes. It has been relatively less involved since the early days of the invasion, but throughout the war, rumors have been circulated about the impending deployment of the Belarusian army against Ukraine. So far, this has not happened, even though it has been reported that Putin has been pushing Lukashenko to send in his troops. But this might be changing. On October 8th, Belarus officially accused Ukraine of preparing to attack its territory. On October 10th, it was reported that Belarus sent several dozens of its T-72A tanks to Russia. Moreover, Lukashenko announced the deployment of the Union States regional grouping of forces. Currently, it seems that only 9,000 Russian soldiers will be in this regional grouping, mainly consisting of the 1st Guards Tank Army and several airborne units, which have suffered heavy losses. Ukrainians claim that Belarus is preparing to host 20,000 mobilized Russians within the framework of the IGF. This may allow these.
Would NATO and the US consider supporting a Ukrainian invasion of Ukraine, or even like NATO forces like invading or like taking Belarus out of the fight, because they don't have nuclear weapons that I'm aware of?
These men to be trained appropriately and to fix a considerable amount of Ukrainian forces near Kyiv to be ready for any incursions from the northern borders of Ukraine. The fact that Belarus is sending tanks and military equipment to Russia instead of stationing it on the border with Ukraine indicates that at this point, Russia and Belarus do not plan to attack Ukraine from the northwest. On October 14th, Lukashenko proclaimed a counter-terrorism operation regime in Belarus, without explaining what it meant. It looks like Belarus is trying to appease Russia by giving it tanks and weapons, and fixing some Ukrainian forces in the region with its posturing. We also have reports that some Shahed drones will be stationed in the Belarusian Lunenets airbase, creating a new vector of aerial threat for Kyiv. It is difficult to say if this was another attempt to put pressure on Ukraine, or a symptom of a future escalation, or just the routine governmental procedure. But some countries diplomatically close to Russia, including China, asked their citizens to leave Ukraine. This gives us a good segue to talk about diplomatic events. The UN vote to condemn Russia's illegal annexation of Ukrainian territory passed with 143 countries in favor, and only 5, Russia, Belarus, North Korea, Nicaragua, and Syria,
Nicaragua? What are you doing?
Against. Rumors that Zelensky and Putin
I have to answer the phone, guys. Sorry, guys. I had to answer.
passed with 143 countries in favor and only 5, Russia, Belarus, North Korea, Nicaragua and Syria, against. Rumors that
going on,
Zelensky and
Nick?
Putin might negotiate during the G20 summit in Indonesia were circulated. Turkey announced its commitment to facilitate the talks between the two countries.
Armenia and Azerbaijan have seemingly taken steps towards a peace treaty, and they managed to do it without Russian participation in the process, showing how the situation changed in the region Russia considered its backyard.
Simultaneously, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries decided to decrease oil production amid the price drop of the commodity. We also learned that the US has intensified negotiations with Venezuela to normalize relations and get more of the Venezuelan oil to the international markets to keep prices stable. China.
Why do we have to normalize relations with an insane dictatorship in Venezuela, Maduro, when us and Canada have enormous amounts of oil that we can produce ourselves? Is it so that this is so annoying? Like, is it because, like, for environmental reasons that the US and Canada don't want to be seen as like, oh, we're increasing oil, so therefore you go and have someone else take the blame for increasing oil and then take their oil? If that's the case, maybe it's not. That is freaking stupid. Why don't we increase our own oil production? God.
China's lukewarm support of Russia continued, but their officials also stated that any nuclear escalation is unacceptable. Not much.
Hold on, what? Sorry, okay, I'm over it.
China's lukewarm support of Russia continued, but their officials also stated that any nuclear escalation is unacceptable. Not much changed on the Zaporizhia and Donbas fronts. In Zaporizhia, sides continued artillery battles without any significant movement. In Donbas, Russia went on with its frontal assaults on Bakhmut and Soledar. Reports of attacks by the Wagner and DPR units on this line emerged on October 3rd, 4th, 5th, 7th, 9th, 10th, 13th and 14th. The 93rd Mechanized Brigade continued its defense against Russian attacks, which were heavily taxing for both sides. For the first time in a while, Russia managed some advances by occupying Mykolaiivka Druha, Zaitseva and Vesela Dolina. The DPR separatist forces claimed they took control of both Opytna, which the Ukrainians have denied, and Ivanherad. It is an interesting wrinkle that Prigozhin denied the DPR claim, stating that battles near Ivanherad were going on, while the Wagner group captured Opytna single-handedly. In the first half of October, Ukraine maintained its momentum by advancing on two different fronts. Russia is hastily sending in Mobics to bolster its thinly manned defensive lines. However, the conduct of mobilization continued to be criticized in Russia. Putin stated that the Ministry of Defense did not make timely changes to the legal framework on the list of those who are not subject to mobilization. Adjustments have to be made. While the chairperson of the Russian State Duma Defense Committee, Andrei Kotopilov, called upon the Russian Ministry of Defense to stop lying. It is quite a heavy accusation, showing the Russian elite's frustration. But the problems with the Russian mobilization are so evident that even Russian officials cannot help but criticize it. For instance, on October 15th, the Russian Defense Ministry stated that 11 conscripts were shot dead and 15 were injured on a military firing range by 2 of their fellow soldiers, possibly on religious grounds. Russia continued its efforts to recruit inmates. According to the Russian human rights organization Sitting Russia, sitting is a slang term for spending time in prison, Gulagu.net and the Foundation for the Rights of Inmates, at least 15,130 inmates have been deployed in Ukraine.
What if they just defect to the Ukrainian soldiers and say, hey, I was in jail over there in Russia. I'll surrender. Can I just not go back? Jeez.
700,000.
I guess I'm like most antsy. One, it's been a really good episode. I was going to say that as if I'm watching like a TV show, which it's not. It's describing real events going on right now. But the more it gets closer to like now when I'm watching, like the more like anxious I get.
Russians have already fled their country since mobilization was declared, according to Forbes' Russia report of October 4th. Other reports claim that the number is higher than 1 million at this point. Russia may claim that the mobilization is partial, but the events on the ground show that it will continue indefinitely. Training, supply, and command of the Mobiks remained a big problem for the Russian army. Tens of thousands are already on the front lines with no training, hundreds dead or captured. The United States continued asserting that there are no indications of Russia preparing for a nuclear strike, but the tension is still there. This tension presumably pushed Elon Musk to suggest his peace proposal, which asks Ukraine to accept the annexation of Crimea by Russia and hold referendums in 4 occupied oblasts of Ukraine.
What? Elon? What? Okay.
Supervised by international monitors and hold referendums.
Why? What does Elon have to do? Why is he butting in on this?
In 4 occupied oblasts of Ukraine, supervised by international monitors. This
I mean, I don't like that at all. Accept annexation of Crimea. Look, first thing I want to say is, if you're of the mindset that like, no, nothing but complete retaking of Ukrainian land and Crimea will see peace, right? Great. Well, I don't think you're being very practical. And so I am going to entertain this stuff. People might get mad, fine. But even this is too much. Maybe, okay, accept the annexation of Crimea and hold, even if they are monitored by international communities, and hold referendums on occupied oblasts. That seems really in the favor of Russia. Why not, like, all right, accept annexation of Crimea, but you get all of the occupied areas other than that back, or give Crimea back to Ukraine, and then you can hold legitimate referendums. But I'm not one of those people who I don't think you are looking for, I don't think you are helpful if you just say, no, the only way is Putin getting charged for war crimes here, or continued possible nuclear war forever. I don't think that's rational. You can say what he's doing is horrible and unfair, and at the same time be able to look at the consequences and have a level head. All right? I don't think this is a good proposal, but I don't think you are sane if you have an all or nothing approach to this.
Caused an angry response from many Ukrainian officials. The American political scientist Ian Bremer accused Musk of making this suggestion after talking to Putin, which Musk vehemently denied. This story developed with reports of SpaceX asking the Pentagon to pay for the use of Starlink in Ukraine. But whether it was due to the reports of the federal investigation of Musk's attempted controversial Twitter purchase or some other reasons, on October 15th, Elon Musk made a U-turn and agreed to continue supporting Ukraine with Starlink. It is good news for Ukraine, as Starlink is a crucial component of the communication system of the Ukrainian army.
Guys, I want to say, obviously, in a perfect world, I would like that. I would like for Ukraine for Crimea to be returned to Ukraine and all the territory to be returned to Ukraine and Putin held for war crimes. Great. I said that. I feel great now about myself. Wow. Pat on my back. But obviously that's not like the only... You got it.
Now let's talk about the losses the sides have endured. There were no recent credible reports on the Ukrainian manpower losses, but according to the October 12th report of the independent Russian media outlet Medusa, 90,000 Russian troops have been killed, disabled, or gone missing since the start of the war. Medusa's report is claimed to be based on an FSB source. By October 16th, the visually confirmed losses of the sides, according to the Oryx blog, are as follows. For Russia, they are 1,342 tanks, 2,773 vehicles, 169 command posts and communication stations, 23 heavy mortars, 414 artillery pieces and vehicles, 137 multiple rocket launchers, 62 aircraft, 53 helicopters, and 138 drones. On the Ukrainian side, the visually confirmed equipment losses are the following: 298 tanks, 778 vehicles, 7 command posts and communication stations, 127 artillery pieces and vehicles, 25 multiple rocket launchers, 52 aircraft, 15 helicopters, and 38 drones.
Guys, so this is like the running total of each of the episodes, right? On the left, like these ones and these ones right here. But then the pluses in parentheses are like what we've covered, the time period that this individual video part of the series is covering. So you can kind of gauge on what are the losses in total and what have the losses been like in the video we've watched. I'm right there, right?
We're going to continue covering the illegal and unprovoked Russian invasion of Ukraine in the coming weeks, so make sure to subscribe and press the bell button to see it. Please consider liking, commenting, and sharing. It helps us immensely. Our videos would be impossible to produce without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links down in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.
Comments do help the algorithm. That was very well video as always, and one of the more kind of emotional. I feel a little bit more animated as like the videos go on, you know. And I guess it's because I'm getting closer to the present. Okay, one thing I always want to make sure in all of my comments and all of the things I say and ask that I understand I'm over here in the U.S. I am not in Ukraine. I'm not even in a European country that could be threatened by Russia. I'm not even in Europe. I'm over here. It's easy for me to say the stuff I am. I can be wrong on any and everything. And so I just want to put that out there. But I'm going to say what's on my mind, right? And hope you guys learned something or can teach me something in the comments. Answer my questions. You're all super, super good at doing that. And I love you guys for it. And I'll see you guys on the next video, all right? Hope you're all doing well. Especially if you're in Ukraine. I hope you're doing as best as you can be. All right. See you guys next time.